So, welcome. I'm glad to host you once again, or this time for the first time, or for the whatever 37th time. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you are listening. I'm glad to join with me in Christ light, and I'm glad to be reminded with this. Ideas that are presented in this Course in Miracles, especially in this second part of the workbook, that connects us very well with what we are making an emphasis at the beginning of this course of the textbook of the Miracles Principles, and looking at also how Jesus as the author, your own Christ mind, has here given extended outlook to the connection of certain miracles principles with very practical daily occurrences, especially in the beginning in situations of the scribe Helen Schackman and Bill Tedford, and give them an understanding also of what it means to be in true communication, no matter as a scribe or now as a listener, as a thinker of these alternative ideas, as the experiencer of the alternative. And it is all about, and this will be in today's class definitely an emphasis at this stage or at this place we are finding ourselves in these Urtext notes about the change of mind, the connection of miracles with that change of mind, and starting with what is actually practiced, referring to ideas that Christ mind shares with you about your identity, about what you identified with before you were willing to accept that alternative, and what the true identity is. And of course, the moment we start teaching or studying this course, we know perfectly well that the identity as a body and identifying with a body was really the core issue, the core problem. Because of that identification with a limited thought, with something that has no reality, with an idea that is lacking wholeness, speaking of the meaning that has been given to the body, and identifying with such limitation has led us to an experience of pain of separation, has led the human mind to a sense of being not only separate from each other, from his loved ones, but first of all, being separate from one's own self. And that sense of separation from one's own self is the sense of separation from Source, from God. And so that practice or reversal or change of mind, reversal of perception that has been sought and is absolutely necessary is really the content of this work given to humanity from out of time called A Course in Miracles. And so it is also mentioned in that lesson 260, which I'm blessed to practice for myself today, bring into my daily life, bring into remembrance wherever I go, whatever I do. And the title of the lesson is Let Me Remember That God Created Me. Let me remember what is real in what I would consider as me being alive and me being existent. It is the direction or directing the mind towards something that is no longer kept in the perception of limitations, is no longer kept and justified of what bodies are doing or what body identification has to offer. And just that first sentence is already amazing and a real awakening to the human mind, to the human conceptual mind. Father, I didn't make myself, although in my insanity I thought I did. It is an admission that I have not created myself. I did not really make myself on the level of who I truly am, the level where we use the word creation as being co-creator with God. I did not make that I am. I have a source, I have a cause, a true cause, and I call it God. I call it wholeness of mind. But in the insanity of separation within the human condition, I, as you, as every human being, has for a moment thought that we have created ourselves. Yet, as your thought, we are speaking to God, right? It is a prayer. Your thought capitalized. I haven't left my source, remaining part of who created me, remaining part of your mind, remaining part of God Himself. Do you remember the lesson? Huh? My mind is part of God's. I'm very holy. Your Son, my Father, calls on you today. Let me remember you created me. Let me remember my identity. And having that remembrance, of course, we are now here invited to do our homework. What is that homework? It is the transformation of limited thought forms. It is this change of mind that allows us to see everything in a new light, everything in that context that has true value. True value is a value that is valuable for all beings, everywhere, all the time, in the entire universe. So we are asked to look at these identifications as a body, with a body, in a body, and bring that identification to a seeing the light, to a vision of Christ, in which literally that imagery that is called the body disappears, and in that disappearance, that creative light that is given us by creation is realized, is recognized. And it will be, I mentioned just here a few sentences out of, it will be the introduction to the next sequence of lessons 261 to 270, because it is the answer given to the question, what is the body? And if we're just looking with what will accompany us for the next 10 days in practicing these lessons of A Course in Miracles, it will direct us right there where the concepts, the self-concept in that identification as a body is looked at, questioned, and opened up. And the whole thing starts with an amazing expression of words by saying that the body is a fence, right? A limitation. It is a fence. It is a, like you have your fences in the garden. It is something which you block, which you use in order to define where as far as it belongs to you, what is your property, what is your possession, what you identify with, and those limits you're drawing to say, and here, within these limits, I have to say, I'm the ruler. But what about looking over the fence and beyond that fence? This is what this change of mind, this course, is training us to teach us that beyond this fence, life really just starts. And the moment we come to that letting go of this self concept of being a body, that's where it gets interesting, because we are arriving at mind, at free thinking, thoughts that are in alignment with spirit, with the Holy Spirit, thoughts that heal, thoughts that reflect and invite to forgive, represent forgiveness, and so represent love. So, here describing first the denial, he's saying that the body is a fence that the Son of God, who is the Son of God? I, you, we all, that the Son of God imagines he has built. See, here is your own creation, quotes, né? Your own making, your own fabrication, your own hallucination. That you have imagined, that you have built to separate parts of yourself, of his self, from other parts. So it explains that the purpose of making a body was from the very beginning to fragment ourselves from other parts, to keep it in fragmentation, to keep it in separation. It is within this fence that he thinks he lives, to die as it decays and crumbles. And for within this fence, he thinks that he is safe. Safe from what? Safe from love. Okay, now we are talking. Safe from love. That is what the ego seeks. That is what the separated human mind, in its justified concept of the self, to be separate from its source, defends and is looking for. It is the ego's teaching. To be safe from love, that is basically the goal of the ego. Identifying with his safety, he regards himself as what his safety is. How else could he be certain he remains within the body, keeping love outside? And if you're looking at relationships that you're having with your loved ones, with your enemies, or with the world in whatever expression, this is what the world is still reflecting you, if you're seeing it that way, if you're aware of that. Therefore, we are acknowledging to be in need of an alternative, to be in need of that change of mind, of which we are speaking of. And then the last paragraph of that introduction offers us then the change to that new way of seeing, towards vision. You will, first he says, you will identify with what you think will make you safe, as we were just sharing it. Whatever it may be, you will believe that it is one with you. So you see also, even if there's an identification with or an idea of safety with a complete illusion of separation, this is what the mind experiences, is part of his mind, is one with it, will defend, will most probably not question. It's already a complete miracle when mind starts to question his own concepts. Your safety lies in truth, not in lies. Our safety is set, indeed, lies in truth and not in the lies that we have told ourselves who we are, but has nothing to do with God, has nothing to do with reality. Love is your safety. Can you hear that, brother? Love is our safety, nothing else. Fear does not exist. Identify with love, and you are safe. Identify with love and you are home. Identify with love and find yourself. These are invitations of your own whole mind, Christ mind, to be completely determined in that new way of walking in your transformation of mind, in your new way of being willing to experience and therefore see yourself, everyone, the entire world in a new light, in that light that represents truth, in that light that radiates of love, in that light that doesn't even see anymore what the ego has taught and made so real over thousands of years. We are here to recognize ourselves. We are here to find our true self. And turning with that information to the beginning of this course, as I'm using here also these original notes that were given to the scribe Helen Schackman by Jesus Christ in his dictation, and looking at those miracles principles, which are in the edited form, 50 miracles principles, we brought it up to miracles principle 41. And we were sharing in the last episode, at the end of the last episode, that wholeness is the perceptual content of the miracle. And it thus corrects and atones for the faulty perception of lack. And we were sharing and directed to have a look at this fundamental distinction between miracles and projection. That is his invitation. You are still within your own dreaming, your own seeing a world, a meaningless world, invited to look at the distinction between miracles and projections, what you have projected. And we left it then as an expression of that 41st miracles principle with the consideration of the golden rule, which he described here in the Urtext very simply. You ask to behave towards others as you would have them behave toward you. I'm asked to behave towards you, to behave towards all the beings, no matter what form they take, as I would have them behave towards me. So if I don't want to be attacked, then I cannot attack. This is really the golden rule, because it directs the mind of taking full responsibility and seeing and acknowledging that there is nobody out there and nothing going on in a meaningless world, but except my own thoughts, my own projections. And this is, of course, valid for everyone who walks this earth. And this is the lesson that is offered us, the lesson that I'm willing and I'm invited to remember, to apply, to experience by these daily invitations in any circumstances, in any situations, in all relationships. We left it at the point where in that original version, in these notes, he continues talking about different things, but it is all under, and that's why I'm bringing it in now, that Miracles Principle 41, that wholeness is the perceptual content of the miracle. And he says here that all forms of self-image debasement are fundamental perceptual distortions. See, what we were just sharing with the lesson of the day, with coming to a true identity, who created us truly, and that God created me, created you, and that identification as a body with a body needs change. Here is a different expression how he calls that, because that identity as a body and identifying with all that the body brings about is really a self-image debasement. The self-image believed to be a body, and the debasement, the devalu- devaluation, literally, the worthless, to bringing that in the mind as strengthening literally a worthless thought, is fundamentally perceptual distortion. That's what he says here. So perceptual distortions are here in order to be changed. Every perceptual distortion, what you perceive and see and give it meaning and hold it real, but is literally a limitation in your mind, a self-image debasement about your own self, who you are, who you believe you are, needs change. And we are here to share that change actively, and of course even joined, shared, or privately in personal situations. They inevitably produce either self-contempt or projection, and usually both. From here, he went into an example talking about the clarifications of the channel role, and used an example with Mrs. Albert. I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to jump over a few paragraphs and enter into where it is still in the context, but he says here, note that the name as a human symbol that stands for a person. A name is a human symbol that stands for a person. So here we are entering now and looking at our identifications, even what is a person for you, can you see through that person? Are you willing and able to look through what the personality, that imagery shows you, and only want to see the light? That's the invitation. That's the curriculum. So first he starts out, note that the name is just a human symbol that stands for a person. Superstitions about names are very common for just that reason. That is also why people sometimes respond with anger when their names are spelled or pronounced incorrectly. Actually, the Jewish superstition about changing the names, I didn't even know about that there was a superstition within the Jewish tradition about changing the names, was a distortion of a revelation about how to alter or avert death. Interesting. So the superstition was you can avoid, you can avert, you can alter death by uh, changing a name. Yeah, but it was a distortion of a revelation. What the revelation's proper content was that those who changed their mind, not name. See, the name was a symbol and it was practiced like changing the name, but indeed it is about changing the mind. And what is in the mind? It is all the thoughts that you accumulated and gave meaning in this fragmented sense. So I think it's very valuable. No? Like almost all of us have at some point changed their name or taken on different names or nicknames and so on and so forth. Yeah, but we are directed. Look, we are actually talking about and teaching change of mind, not name. And he brings it here in the content that it was those who changed their mind, not name, about destruction, put in parentheses, or hate, do not need to die. Those who change their mind about destruction, about attack thoughts, about a world seeing of hate and destruction. You see, it's not really any accident that he brings that together, that he says here in parentheses hate. Obviously, hate is must be understood like destruction. And you see that in the world constantly, isn't it? What you see now, or those who speak up politically and what is all going on, and I'm not even going into an example, but it is considered and seen as an expression of hate, because behind that is an idea of destruction. And even to bringing this world down, bringing systems down, bringing whatever down, those are expressions of hate because they are expressions of destruction. And it is an idea about another idea of the ego to sell death as a reality. But he makes it here clear that those who change their mind do not need to die. Death is a human affirmation of a belief in hate. What an expression, isn't it? Death is an affirmation of a belief in hate. And that is why the Bible says there is no death. And that is why I demonstrated, Jesus says that, that death does not exist. Remember that I came to fulfill the law by reinterpreting it. The law itself, if properly understood, offers only protection to man. Those who have not yet changed their minds have entered he calls it here, the hellfire concept into it. Very interesting. And that's really what it is. Every awakened mind will say that. Hell is not somewhere where you're going to go. Hell is where you are if you are in pain and separation, right? If you believe in a world of separation, that is what hell is, that perception, that suffering. Good to see you. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you. Welcome, welcome. Okay, he continues. Remember, I said before that because, and he puts that in quotes, nature abhors a vacuum. Like abhor means hate, means like you reject it. Nature abhors a vacuum. It does not follow that the vacuum is filled with fire. The emptiness engendered by fear, should be replaced. Guess where we arrive? By love. Emptiness engendered by fear should be replaced by love, because love and its absence are in the same dimension, and correction cannot be undertaken except within a dimension. Otherwise, there has been a confusion of levels. So here Jesus, this teaching of A Course in Miracles, obviously offers you a change of mind that helps me to get out of these level confusions, of confusing what is of the ego and what is reality, trying to bring that together, still being in imagery, still being in illusions, still believing in the meaning of limitation given to everything. So here's an attempt through called A Course in Miracles to free our mind, to guide us, to guide the human consciousness, the human mind out of this confusion of levels. And that is really the immense value that this course has. Now I'm jumping over a few paragraphs and continue reading here before he goes then into the next Miracles Principle 42. If you ask somebody what he believes before you tell him what you believe, then you're implying that you will say what he approves. If you ask somebody what he believes before you tell him what you believe, you're implying that you will say what he approves. This is not the true authority. You took a lot of notes. He talking to Helen Schuckman, right? Those who are ashamed of me before man, those who are ashamed of Jesus before man, them will I be ashamed of before God. Ne? That was that was what Helen Schuckman brought in and was contemplating. Now he says this was rather carefully clarified, even though the quotation is not quite right, but it doesn't matter. So this is, I'm mentioning it also. See, the representation of truth as Christ's mind, as the voice of the Holy Spirit, indeed doesn't really, care about, let's say, or uh, needing to correct you with everything that comes through your mind and is not quite right, because it doesn't matter. So there's a clarity within the mind. What doesn't matter doesn't not really be analyzed and going into a correction process. Where the correction has to take place is at the basis of how we think, how we place our concepts, our self-concept within our own mind, and determine or define what the continuing thought forms should be, and therefore determine what our belief system and what our experience is. So that needs change. So here he continues simply by saying that the important thing is that elsewhere in the Bible, it also says that those who represent or plead for me to man will be represented or pleaded for by me before God. So those who represent me, those who teach what I taught, will also be represented by him before God. Note, this quotation is also not the correct biblical phrasing, but it is what it means. So he gives you already the meaning. I don't even know where in the Bible that is what he refers here. Note that one who represents also witnesses for. One who represents also gives witness to. The quotation thus means that you represent or witness for the authority in whom you believe. And here it is. Here are the choices, ego or God. Right? Your self-made reality or coming from an experience and the pure recognition, seeing capitalized, thinking, knowingness, knowledge itself. Your witnessing demonstrates your belief and thus strengthens it. That what we represent, that what we witness for, demonstrates our beliefs, and we strengthen our beliefs exactly in that way how we represent it, how we witness it for. I assure you that I will witness for anyone who lets me, and to whatever extent he himself permits it. Those who witness for me are expressing through your miracles that they have abundant deprivation in favor of the abundance they have learned belongs to them. Again, those who witness for me are expressing through their miracles that they have abundant deprivation, that they have abundant limitation in favor of the abundance they have learned belongs to them. It is an expression of that you allow that replacement of thought that all is yours and you are all. And now it becomes perfectly reasonable, as the lesson teaches, let me remember God created me. I am that God created in its wholeness, perfection. Beautiful. And so here is the 40-second miracles principles. A major contribution of miracles is their strength in releasing man from his misplaced sense of isolation, deprivation, and lack. You see, now it makes sense. All these ideas of the self-debasement, of the deprivation of the thinking faculty in its unlimited nature is really what the miracles contributes and shows us is strength. A major contribution of miracles is their strength in releasing man, freeing us up from the misplaced sense of isolation, of deprivation, and lack. They are affirmation of sonship, he adds on, which is a state of completion and abundance. Beautiful, isn't it? These miracles, these representations are affirmations of sonship, which is a state of completion and abundance. So when we are talking about that it affirms the sonship, that the sonship becomes whole, one, we remember that we are talking indeed of a state of mind that accepts that abundance is present, that everyone within the sonship is aware and recognizes that abundance. Completion is that is literally the only value accepted, that I'm complete, I'm whole, you are complete, you are whole. Every being is complete, is whole, because there is this realization who created us, that God created you, that God created us. Well, from here he goes to making, looking at emphasis on changing your mind. And he makes here some clarifications and says, whatever is true and real is eternal and cannot change or be changed. Okay, truth is unchangeable. Truth doesn't change. It is always the same one truth. The soul, that has been then described as spirit, is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect, but the mind can elect the level it chooses to serve. The only limit which is put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. It cannot serve two masters. It cannot serve the voice that speaks for God and the ego, right? From here it goes actually with an example of the ballot and the right to vote. While the ballot itself is a secret one and the right to vote is fully protected, voting always entails both election and rejection. If two candidates are voted for the same position, the machine cancels the ballot automatically for one. This is necessary because a split vote doesn't represent any real allegiance. Free will is the attribute of the mind, not the soul. Free will. The soul always remains changeless because it never leaves the sight of God. The creation of the soul is already fully accomplished. The mind, if it votes to do so, becomes a medium by which the soul can create along the line of its own creation. If it doesn't freely elect to do so, it retains this creative ability, but places itself under the tyrannous rather than authoritative control. As a result, what it creates is imprisonment, because such are the dictates of the tyrants. Who is the one tyrant? It's really the ego that is believed as being real within one's own thinking faculty, isn't it? to change your mind. And you will find that expression then in the edited version in the 5th section of chapter 1, in the 5th paragraph. To change your mind means to place it at the disposal of true authority. Now, what is true authority? Again, we are directed to God's mind. We are directed to the representation of God Himself, the Holy Spirit, Christ walking with us. True authority. The miracle is thus a sign that the mind has elected to be guided by Christ in His service. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow Him. Again, he picks it up, abundance, right? Which we are here to accept and so to represent, to witness for. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him, to follow Christ. The reason you have been late recently for a week obviously speaks about me, about El Chakran. You can think about it as you like. Because you were taking dictation, right, is merely because you didn't remember to ask me when to stop. What a nice reminder. Yeah? So this communication, what to do, when to start, when to stop, is all when we are really being willing to accept Christ's control in as we receive his message, because he didn't remember to ask me when to stop. This is an example of the indiscriminate or uncontrolled miracle working we already spoke of. It is well meant but ill advised. And further down, then, note also that you closed the book and put it aside without consulting me. Ask, is that all? Answer, no, at the following. These notes are serving, among other things, to replace the handwriting on the wall, and that's what obviously Helen also did, the handwriting on the wall, which you once saw next to your own altar, which read, "You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting." Scribes must learn Christ control. So this is just an example of teaching that you as a teacher of God, receiving his word, no matter if you are doing it by thinking, by speaking, by expressing yourself, or by scribing, scribes must learn Christ's control to replace their former habits, which did produce scarcity rather than abundance. Wow. See, now you know where scarcity came from and how you now can reply if scarcity shows up. Just be in that communication. Open your mind for Christ-controlled miracles, for Christ-controlled communication with him. Because it's all just a habit within the human conceptual mind. And that opens you up to a way larger perspective. Well, one sentence more, and then I'm asking him, and then we're going to leave it for today. From errors of this kind, the sense of deprivation is inevitable, but very easily corrected. And we were just pointing that out. You know, the easy correction is to reestablish communication with him, to ask him, what would you want me to? And even to ask what to start and when or how to stop something. Because within the conceptual understanding, we truly do not know. And so this needs to be learned also, to bring it under the guidance of him. And so to accept that guidance is called Christ-controlled acting and living. And through that acceptance, that You no longer manage your own affairs by just your own willpower in reference to the past, projected onto the future. You are actually being settled by that strength that you receive in that contact with Him, settled in the very present moment, settled in what we call the here and now, settled in a clarity. It isn't about the past and it isn't about the future either. All happiness, all fulfillment, all abundance, all completion is only realized right here, right now, this very moment, in this connection, in this union, in this experience. So thank you with all my heart. I see you everywhere, see you out of time. And let's just join for an instant with that unleashed song that we just shared in the beginning, in a moment of complete stillness and quietness. I love you. Bye bye.